Well, the Green New Deal promises to tear down our power plants, ground our airplanes, stop our cars in the driveway, all in the name of the environment. But now, young pioneer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says there will be another casualty in the implementation of the Great Green Leap Forward: flatulent cows.
My Twitter mentions, I'm getting a lot of references about cow farts. And I think that's a reference to your Green New Deal.
Yes.
Can you explain that for us?
Yes. In the deal, what we talk about is, and it's true, is that we need to take a look at factory farming, period. It's wild. Listen, we got to address factory farming. Maybe we shouldn't be eating a hamburger for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, let's keep it real.
Slow down.
Let's keep it real. Maybe we shouldn't be eating hamburgers. I mean, it's wild. Or driving cars or using appliances or having a middle class. Basically, that's the gist of it. Chris Hahn is radio host, a former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, a longtime Democrat who's watching, no doubt, in horror as his party goes insane. He joins us tonight to pretend it's all okay. Great to see you, Chris. So, when you look, and I know you want to beat Trump, all Democrats want to beat Trump. Even some Republicans are just distressed by Trump.
We're gonna.
And maybe so. But when you look at the new leader of your party, the only Democrat powerful enough to keep Amazon out of New York, AOC, run in favor of grounding airplanes, stopping car travel, and telling people how many burgers they can eat, do you think that's a winning message for you guys?
Look, she's trying to move the center back to the center, and the only way the left could do that is if they start on the left. I think for far too many years, the left have allowed the right to define the center as actually the right. And I think that's been a problem for progressives and Democrats in their policymaking, and it has disillusioned millions of voters who've turned away from them and gone to the Green Party and other parties.
I just want to be clear on getting this.
I don't think
this is the best explanation I've ever heard. So you're saying that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a centrist?
What I'm saying is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others who are actually proposing things that are actually seeming very far to the left have a chance of actually getting a compromise that's in the center, something Democrats have abandoned since Reagan.
So by this reasoning, I would say we would be having an argument about crime, and I would say anyone accused of a crime should be summarily executed in the street like they did in Saigon during the war. And you would say, that's crazy. And I'd be like, you know what? I'm really a centrist. I'm just trying to bring us back to a sensible crime policy. I mean, shouldn't elected officials describe what they really want instead of saying crazy things to move the Overton window or whatever you're arguing?
Well, no, I think she actually does want a lot of the things in that deal. I don't think that most Democrats agree with everything in that deal, but they would like to get somewhere where we actually move the ball forward on climate change and not just go back to the same old tired conservative principles. The best example on this, for example, Tucker, is Obamacare. Obamacare was a centrist right-wing policy before Obama took it off.
I know, I've heard the talking point. It came from the Heritage Foundation
and Republicans called it socialism.
I know the whole thing. I mean, by the way, if Obamacare worked, I think we got Obamacare in the end, then why do some people not have health insurance? Why do the majority of bankruptcies result from medical bills? If Obamacare was, Obamacare actually didn't work. Can we just say that? I mean, since you brought it up.
I think he should have started on the left. He should have had a robust public option, but he was afraid of being called a socialist.
Wait a second. I was told that Obamacare was a panacea, and if I disagreed, I was a racist.
Democrats might as well ask for what they want, because Republicans are going to call them a socialist no matter how market-friendly their policy is.
Okay. Right. So, but just bottom line, do you think that the government ought to control how many hamburgers you eat? Let's just start there. Really simple.
Look, in my case, it would be very hard for them to do that. So, no, I don't believe they should.
So you're a hamburger resistor now. You're saying you're going to take it from my cold, dead hands.
I'm not a member of Congress.
Okay. So you're not going to, Chris Hahn is on the record. You come from my hamburger. You want a piece, take it. That's what you're saying.
You're gonna steal it from my cold, dead arteries.
That's a spirit. Chris Hahn, good to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Green New Deal now taking heat from both sides, also, though, shaking up the debate. So where does this lead us? Doug McElroy has been looking at this all week now, live in D.C. What you find out, Doug?
Morning, Bill. Well, for diehard skeptics of climate change, the rollout of the Green New Deal with its wealth redistribution and its restructuring of the entire economy was a bit of a tip-off to a hidden agenda.
We always knew climate was a stalking horse for socialism, communism, totalitarianism, whatever you want to call it.
But even many Democrats who support a climate change agenda saw the rollout as an absurd overreach.
I've read it and I've reread it, and I asked Ed Markey, what in the heck is this?
Well, some hope that from the excesses of the Green New Deal, more moderate voices emerge.
The climate debate has been driven for years by the edges of each party, and having a, more aggressively unrealistic left edge to contradict the, irresponsible right edge is not likely to actually create the kind of consensus that's necessary to have meaningful change.
Others question whether there is any urgency at all to the climate debate, that the so-called 97% consensus of climate scientists is meaningless. Climatologist John Christie of the University of Alabama notes that the greatest scientific discoveries in history have broken with consensus.
Take a real hard look at climate model output and can demonstrate that these models are just too sensitive to carbon dioxide, and that the real world is not spiraling off into some dangerous territory of climate.
Novelist Michael Crichton once suggested in a lecture another solution. He looked back to the turn of the last century when people, quote, didn't know what radio was, or an airport, or a movie, or a television, or a computer, or a cell phone, or a jet, an antibiotic, a rocket, a satellite, an MRI, ICU, IUD, or what IBM was. Well, in that lecture, he went on and on. You get his point. If humankind is to impact climate change for the better, he felt that it may come from the tinkerer, the genius, the technology yet unknown, not from the imposition of restrictions from a centralized government. Bill?
Good stuff, Doug. Thank you.
I mean, there is this sort of basic issue, which we talked about before, of everybody in an affluent society should have enough. And we clearly have issues now about whether or not that's the case and how to create it. The how to create it part becomes a really interesting one. So part of the problem of looking at the 50s as some sort of ideal benchmark is, one, as David said, the actual tax rate was far lower than the 90% top tax rate because of all the loopholes. And two, we didn't have the safety net commitments that came with the Great Society after 1965, which are far more expansive and which you're not going to fund by taxing every marginal dollar over $5 million at 90%, meaning the trillions of dollars that costs is not going to come from this. And that is a real social issue that we need to address. Now, there are some who say we should just cut the safety net. I happen to not agree with that. I'm just concerned that in all this conversation about marginal tax rates for very wealthy, you deal with an easy symptom and you totally overlook the major cause and an actual solution to it.
Well, there's no reason why the amount of the budget deficit was written in stone tablets by God or something. It was changed by Republicans by billions of dollars last year. It can be changed again. It's not the point of how much revenue we raise. The point of the taxes is there's this gross unfairness, whereas rich investors pay tax at a much lower rate than people that actually work for a living, and that's just simply not fair.
So you're not opposed
Morris,
to... Go ahead, sorry.
Morris, I have so many questions for you. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fit them into my segment here. First of all, you started out with the inflammatory gross inequality. I'm sure you'd agree that the word gross is subjective rather than objective. Second of all, wasn't this country kind of founded and became the greatest country in the world because of that inequality? I'll give you two examples. Everyone knows that Donald Trump is the richest president. I'm sure you probably do not know that the two next richest presidents were George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. No one held it against them that they were big landowners, that they were working people that accomplished a great deal. It's the fact that Bill Gates is fabulously wealthy and grossly unequal to everyone else. He enriched lives, millions of lives around the world. So when you say gross inequality, I argue with that as being A, subjective, and B, that's what people in America strive for. Don't you agree with that?
Well, sure. I'll leave whether the inequality is gross or not to your judgment. But this country was founded by people who created things called commonwealths, we had commonwealths because they understood when they founded the country that we needed commonwealth to do things, to do the things that made America great.
It was not created by people that founded Commonwealth at all. Did George Washington, did Andrew Carnegie, did John Rockefeller create Commonwealth? No, they created wealth by their private enterprise that enriched everyone else. I don't understand what you mean by Commonwealth unless you talk about an increasingly large government.
George Washington ran the Commonwealth of Virginia when he was elected president.
But before that, he was a wealthy landowner.
That's true. I'm all for people being wealthy, and at that time,
but you want to cap it at some subjective, gross inequality, as if we could put a determination on that.
Well, I think that those people who are wealthy, back then, those are the only people who paid taxes. And actually working people didn't pay taxes at all. Only landowners paid taxes.
Right, and the top 70% now pay all the taxes in the country now. In fact, the top, 10% probably pay 80% of the taxes now.
Well, that's because so many of our people in our country don't have enough money to even live on, much less pay taxes.
So it's not about taxes then. It's about redistribution of wealth, and that kind of gets to the wealth tax itself, because more than taxing income, this is a confiscation of property, something that our Constitution guards against as much as our individual human rights. So aren't you concerned that you're kind of chopping away at a concept that's fundamental to what makes America great, which is private property itself?
No, we're not chopping away at private property.
Wealth tax is a confiscation of property on which you have already paid your taxes, your income tax, your capital gains, whatever tax. It is actually taken. In fact, the reason why 8 out of 12 European countries have gotten rid of the wealth tax once they put it on was because there were a lot of people who were property rich but cash poor. That is, they had inherited a big property which made them sound rich, but they had to sell that property very much at a discount very often in order to pay these wealth taxes, so they got out of the country.
Well, we're talking about paying a higher tax rate for those people with the highest incomes. That's what Representative Ocasio-Cortez was talking about. And those people currently, in many cases like me, pay lower tax rates than people who actually work for a living.
David's talking about the wealth tax part, which was Elizabeth Warren's idea, of which he also supports.
I think you also support a wealth tax. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, in terms of the actual efficacy of a wealth tax, it sounds to me like a complete nightmare every year to have everyone trying to assess exactly the value of every investment they have, every private fund, et cetera, et cetera. But let me go back to this capital gains issue, because that seems to be your big problem, is that you're, no, not a problem, your big concern is that you pay a lower tax rate because it's capital gains. So this is a serious thing, because occasionally this comes up on Twitter. If you feel like you're undertaxed, which is a very generous thing, why don't you just write a check to the federal government? I'm saying that completely seriously.
Well, look, I'll answer you completely seriously then. The point isn't my own personal taxes. The point is that people in general with higher incomes having to pay lower tax rates than people that actually work
from an efficacy level, why not then pursue ending the capital gains tax and the dividend tax and the carried interest, which has been a huge issue, and there's some real bipartisan consensus there that these loopholes only benefit a very few number of people proportionally. The problem of then creating these thresholds is, again, you could do all the marginal tax rate increases on the very wealthy and still not solve the issues of homelessness, Medicare overruns, Medicaid overruns, and whether or not people are going to have affordable health care. And that, again, there are people who will disagree with that presumption on the right, but there are a lot of people who would say, look, this is something we really need to deal with. There's simply not enough income. There's not enough redistributive income to pay for those things. And by focusing entirely on that, as if that then solves it, I'm personally concerned about.
Give Morris a chance to respond, and we have to go.
Well, look, sure. I don't claim that changing taxes will solve all of the problems with health care, homelessness, and everything else in the world. But I do claim that having those people at the top paying their fair share, and I support most of the things you mentioned, such as ending the capital gains loophole and having lower tax rates on dividends and capital gains, those things are all good things and will contribute to lessening inequality and therefore making society.
Morris Pearl, great to have you here, Morris. Thank you. Please come again. We enjoyed the discussion.